Welcome to Part 3. Now that we've discussed what non-standard work hours are, how stress in the workplace can affect individuals, and some strategies for keeping those stressors from spilling over into non-work life, we'll now discuss the effects non-standard work hours has on marriage and future directions. So effects of non-standard work hours on marriage. Individuals within marriages have multiple roles. So you have your employee role, your spouse role, as well as your individual needs. Each role is balancing your work responsibilities, individual needs, and needs of spouse. When this balance is interrupted, role overload is common. You need to be able to know which role to choose at the correct moment. Married couples are dyads, where actions and behaviors of one spouse affects the other spouse. Specifically in this situation, a partner's job may affect the other partner's social role experiences. As I said, each role is balancing. And this work-marriage balance is based on psychological involvement of each spouse. Each spouse needs to be able to satisfy multiple roles, but also the correct roles for the correct moment. So when these roles get mixed up, or one outweighs the other, role overload, the balance is off, and crossover effects can occur, bringing stressors of the work life into the married life. Consequences of non-standard work hours, such as lack of sleep or mental health issues based on the non-standard work hours, can then spill over into the marriage, which then creates marital discord, dissatisfaction, and ultimately affecting marital quality, which then puts couples at greater risk for separation or divorce. There are many positive and negative factors of non-standard work hours and how it affects individuals and married couples. Please take 5 to 7 minutes and make a list of positives and negatives of how you think non-standard work hours can affect marriage and any impacts that they may have. So some positives for married couples: business growth for job stability. It can provide childcare opportunities where one parent can stay home while the other parent is working. It can allow opportunities to have more than one job, higher pay with certain shifts, compacted schedules, which could mean that you work 3 days in a row and then be off for 7 or 8 days, and flexible schedules. All of these things can be positives for marriage. So nurses is a great example of how sometimes undesirable shifts, such as night shifts, weekends, they can get higher wages for working these shifts. Holidays, a lot of times, they may get time and a half, so that can be incentives for certain people to work certain shifts. It could actually be a positive with a greater pay or having greater flexibility within their schedules. There are lots of disadvantages for married couples, and the list is long. They can have lower wages, less desirable work, could be more dangerous jobs, job insecurity. It may be that they're just hired temporarily. It can cause sleep disturbances, especially if shifts change from week to week or every few weeks. They may be working different hours, even if they're working different night shifts. Family schedules, it could be that a parent goes in at 3 p.m. and misses the children when they get home from school, which eliminates any of the evening activities or time with their family and children or their spouses, which can be very stressful when they miss out on leisure activities, which can all affect mental health, physical health. Depression and anxiety is higher. Physical health, obesity, heart disease, even type 2 diabetes can be more prevalent in individuals that work non-standard work hours. They can also have less benefits because if they're working part-time or if they're just seasonal or contract workers, they may not have access to benefits from the companies. Job role quality, it could be that they don't feel really a part of the team or the company and that they're just working these shifts as temporary workers. And then again, having rotating versus set schedules can be very important for married couples. And then all of these negative things can then spill over into a marriage. So there's a lot of things to think about and consider when you're talking about the disadvantages that non-standard schedules can have on marriages. And this can all lead to higher rates of divorce and separation. So the consequences of working non-standard schedules often differs for men and for women, since housework and childcare responsibilities remain assigned primarily to women, even when both spouses are employed. As with many other social problems, the burden of these schedules disproportionately affects working poor, reflecting their lack of options in the workplace, adding to their disadvantage. So with spouses often not home together in the evenings, the concept of home time for many couples and families has become a primary concern due to schedule conflict, leading couples not being together or parents not being home with their children. So where do we go from here? So there's gendered and cultural differences for how couples perceive non-standard work hours. So we need to consider maybe how wives differ from husbands, as well as maybe how different cultures view having non-standard work schedules. We need to have stronger, diverse samples with many different cultural backgrounds as we gain perspectives from the men and the women. And this is something that's lacking in research. Another thing that's lacking is not addressing this dyadic relationship, as we mentioned before, the going between one spouse to the other. And so it's really just looking at one spouse. So a lot of research just interviews the husband or just the wife, and we know that being married is an interaction relationship and that it would be better to get information from both spouses as opposed to just one, and then having them report based on what they think the other spouse needs or wants. Another thing that came up in research is individual couples choose non-standard work hour employment has not been examined enough. Why are people doing it? Is it because they get paid more? Is it because it affects the child care? Is it for their schedules? And a lot of times that can affect why families and individuals and couples are choosing non-standard work hours. And a lot of studies fail to control for the stressful work environment, such as lack of autonomy or flexibility that could be causing the stressors, and it may not be the actual hours itself, but these stressors that are causing the spillover effects into marriage. The other thing research is lacking is not fully addressing the impacts of spillover into marriages. So how does lack of sleep affect married couples? How does schedule types affect married couples? Mental health, depression, anxiety, and as well as just how do couples manage stress in general together. And the non-standard work hours with all those disadvantages that we listed, how are they able to then have resiliency and cope through those things? So we need more diverse samples. We need to consider cultural and gender considerations, address this dyadic relationship, including both husbands and wives, to address this back and forth interactions. We need to understand more why people are choosing non-standard work hours, and we need to consider that they may not all be negative. It could be some of the positives that fulfill marriages and provide support and needed mechanisms to have a healthy, positive relationship. We need to control for stressors and address the impacts of spillover. So in conclusion, we have learned that there are many types of non-standard work schedule employment. There are both positive and negative effects on non-standard work hours on marriage. The work-life balance is essential for marital stability. Otherwise, it leads to spillover effects and also role overload. We need further examination of mechanisms that lead to marital instability for those who have at least one spouse working non-standard work hours. Thank you.